Let me say this right from the start. Something unusual is happening right now, and it's not just about one video, one network, or one political argument. It's about power, control, and who gets to shape the narrative. Because when powerful people start talking about lawsuits, when they start reacting emotionally, when they start calling out smaller media platforms directly, that's not random. That's a signal. And right now, all eyes are on what's happening between Donald Trump, his family, and the Midas Touch network. Now, before we go any further, let's keep this grounded. This is not about picking sides. This is not about left versus right. This is about understanding why reactions like this happen and what it tells us about the current media landscape. Because whether you agree or disagree with any of these figures, you have to ask, why would a former president and his entire circle suddenly focus on a digital media network? That's the real story. Let's break it down in a simple way. A post gets shared. That post references a Financial Times article about business dealings involving Trump's sons. Then a comment is added, critical, sarcastic, but not unusual in today's online political space. And suddenly, there's talk of defamation, legal threats, warnings, public responses. Now here's where it gets interesting. Because in politics, reactions are rarely just about the surface. They're about perception. When someone threatens legal action, it does two things at the same time. First, it sends a message. Be careful what you say about us. But second, and this is often overlooked, it also amplifies the original story. More people start paying attention. More people start asking questions. More people start digging deeper. And in today's world, attention is everything. Now let's zoom out for a moment, because what we're witnessing right now isn't just a single media clash or a one-off controversy. It's part of a much bigger transformation that's been quietly unfolding over the past decade. We are living in a time where traditional media is no longer the only gatekeeper of information. There was a period when a handful of television networks, major newspapers, and large institutions had near total control over what people saw, heard, and believed. If something didn't make it onto those platforms, it practically didn't exist in the public conversation. But that world is gone. Today, you don't need a massive TV network, a billion-dollar newsroom, or decades of institutional backing to influence millions of people. All you really need is a platform, a message, and the ability to connect with an audience in a direct and authentic way. Digital platforms have completely changed the game. Independent networks, YouTube channels, podcasts, live streams, and even short-form clips on social media are now shaping public opinion at a speed that traditional media simply can't match. A single viral video can reach more people in 24 hours than some cable networks reach in a week. And more importantly, it can do it without filters, without gatekeepers, and without waiting for approval. That's a massive shift, because for the first time, the power to influence narratives is not concentrated in a few hands. It's distributed across thousands of voices. Some of those voices are experienced journalists. Others are commentators, analysts, or even ordinary individuals who've built trust with their audience over time. And that decentralization of influence, it's powerful, but it's also disruptive. Because when control starts to shift, discomfort follows. For decades, certain systems were built around centralized authority, where information flowed in one direction, from the top down. But now, that flow has changed. It's dynamic, it's interactive, it moves in every direction at once. Audiences are no longer passive consumers. They question, they respond, they fact-check, and they share. They decide what trends, what goes viral, and what gets ignored. In many ways, they've become part of the media itself. And that reality is uncomfortable for a lot of people, especially those who were used to operating within the old system. Because when control is centralized, it's predictable. But when control is distributed, it becomes unpredictable. You can't easily manage it. You can't easily contain it. And you definitely can't ignore it. That's why moments like this, where digital platforms collide with powerful figures, are becoming more common. It's not just about disagreements or debates. It's about a deeper shift in who gets to speak, who gets to be heard, and ultimately, who gets to shape the story. And right now, that control is no longer in one place. It's moving, and everyone can feel it. Think about it for a second. Really, think about how fast things have changed. Just a few years ago, the flow of information was much more controlled and predictable. If you wanted to understand what was happening in politics, you turned on major TV networks, read large newspapers, or followed statements from established institutions. These platforms didn't just report the news, they shaped the narrative around it. They decided what stories mattered, how they were framed, and how often they were repeated. And because of that, they held enormous influence. If something wasn't covered by them, it struggled to gain traction. If a topic wasn't highlighted during primetime television or printed on the front page, it rarely became part of the national conversation. In many ways, attention itself was curated. But look at where we are now. That entire system has been disrupted. Today, a single YouTube channel can break down complex political events and reach millions within hours. A podcast episode can spark debates across countries. A short viral clip, sometimes less than a minute long, can redefine how people perceive a situation. And the most important part? None of this requires approval from traditional gatekeepers. That's a fundamental shift, because now, influence is no longer reserved for large institutions with decades of credibility and infrastructure. It's accessible to individuals and independent platforms that understand how to connect with audiences in real time. And this doesn't just change how information spreads, it changes how it's consumed. People are no longer waiting for scheduled broadcasts. They're actively searching, scrolling, sharing, and reacting. They're choosing who they trust, often based on relatability and clarity rather than legacy status. And that's where things start to get complicated. Because when new systems rise, they don't replace the old ones overnight. They exist alongside them. Traditional media is still powerful. It still reaches millions. It still influences policy, perception, and public debate. But now it has competition. And not just competition in terms of audience size, but competition in speed, tone, and connection. Digital platforms are faster. They're more direct. They feel more personal. And that creates a new kind of tension. Not just political tension, where different ideologies clash, but something deeper. Media tension. A tension between old systems and new ones. Between structured reporting and rapid commentary. Between controlled narratives and open, unpredictable conversations. Because from one perspective, this shift is empowering. It gives more people a voice. It allows for diverse viewpoints. It breaks monopolies over information. But from another perspective, it's destabilizing. Because when everyone has a voice, it becomes harder to control the message. When content moves faster than verification, it raises questions about accuracy. And when influence is decentralized, authority itself starts to blur. So what we're seeing right now isn't just a change in technology, it's a transformation in how power operates within media. And that transformation naturally creates friction, because every system, old or new, is trying to adapt, compete, and survive in this rapidly evolving space. And in the middle of it all, the audience is the one deciding who wins. So, when a network like Midas Touch starts gaining real traction, something important begins to change, and it doesn't happen overnight. At first, it looks like just another growing channel. A few viral clips here, a couple of strong interviews there, maybe a loyal audience that keeps coming back. But then, slowly, the reach expands. More people start sharing the content. Clips begin circulating beyond the original audience. Conversations start forming around what's being said. And that's the turning point. Because once a platform moves from simply creating content to actually influencing conversations, it crosses a line. It's no longer just participating in the media space, it's shaping it. When interviews begin to get referenced by others, when reactions start appearing across different platforms, when public figures respond, directly or indirectly, that's when you know something bigger is happening. At that stage, the network is no longer just another channel. It becomes a player. And being a player in today's media environment comes with a completely different set of dynamics. Because now, the stakes are higher. Every word matters more. Every clip travels further. Every narrative carries weight. And most importantly, visibility increases. Not just from supporters, but from critics as well. Because influence attracts attention. And attention brings scrutiny. People start analyzing the content more closely. Opposing voices begin pushing back, statements get dissected, reframed, and challenged. And this is where the environment shifts from growth to pressure. Because once you're seen as a player, you're no longer operating on the sidelines. You're part of the main conversation. And in that space, disagreements are inevitable. But it goes even deeper than that. In competitive environments, whether it's politics, media, or business, any rising influence is naturally viewed as something to respond to, not necessarily because of personal conflict, but because of impact. If a platform is shaping how people think, if it's influencing how issues are discussed, if it's reaching audiences that were previously out of reach, then it becomes strategically important. And that's when attention turns into focus. And focus can quickly turn into pressure, because now every move is being watched. Supporters expect consistency, critics look for weaknesses, and competitors monitor every step. This is the reality of becoming a player. It's not just about growth anymore, it's about positioning. And with that positioning comes something unavoidable. You become a target. Not necessarily in a negative sense every time, but in a very real, structural way. You become someone others respond to, someone others challenge, someone others try to counter. Because in a space where narratives shape perception and perception shapes influence, no major voice goes unchallenged. That's just how the system works. So when you see moments where a growing platform suddenly finds itself at the center of attention, facing criticism, pushback, or even strong reactions, it's not random. It's often a sign that the platform has reached a new level, a level where it's no longer being overlooked, but actively engaged with. And whether that engagement comes in the form of support or opposition, it confirms one thing: the platform is no longer on the outside, it's in the arena. Now let's talk about the emotional side of this, because this is where things really stand out. We're seeing strong language, we're seeing personal attacks, we're seeing public frustration. And again, that's not random. In communication, especially political communication, tone matters. When someone is calm, controlled, and measured, they appear confident. But when reactions become intense, when responses become frequent, when multiple people from the same circle respond at once, it creates a different perception. It feels like pressure, and pressure usually comes from one thing: losing control of the narrative. Now here's something even more important. There's also a moment involving a televised debate, a clash of opinions. One side presenting arguments with data and references, the other reacting emotionally. And this moment spreads online. Clips go viral. People start forming opinions, not based on full context, but on short, impactful moments. This is how modern media works. Not long speeches, not detailed reports, but 30-second clips that define the entire story. And once that clip spreads, it doesn't matter what the original intention was. The audience decides what it means. Now let's talk about something deeper. Why do these moments go viral? Why do people engage so strongly? It's not just about politics. It's about identity. People don't just watch content anymore. They connect with it. They defend it. They share it because it reflects how they feel. So when a network presents information in a confident, direct, and assertive way, it resonates, especially with audiences who feel unheard. And this is where your opportunity and your angle comes in. Because instead of just repeating what others are saying, you're doing something smarter. You're stepping back and asking, what does this situation actually reveal? It reveals that media is no longer centralized, influence is no longer controlled by a few voices, and reactions from powerful figures are becoming more visible than ever before. Now, let's address the legal angle briefly, because words like defamation get used a lot. But in reality, these cases are complex. They depend on what was said, how it was said, whether it can be proven false, and whether there was intent. So when legal threats are mentioned publicly, sometimes they lead to real action, and sometimes they're part of a broader strategy, a way to push back, a way to discourage criticism, a way to shift the conversation. Again, this is not about judging. This is about understanding. Now here's the part most people miss. While all of this is happening, the audience is watching, learning, adapting. People are becoming more aware of how narratives are built, how clips are framed, how reactions shape perception. And that awareness, it's changing everything. Because today, the real power doesn't just belong to politicians or media networks. It belongs to the audience, the people who choose what to watch, what to believe, what to share. And that's why moments like this matter, not because of who is right or wrong, but because they show how the system is evolving. Now think about this. If a digital network can trigger responses from major political figures, if a single clip can dominate conversations, if independent voices can compete with traditional media, then we are no longer in the old system. We're in something new, something faster, something more unpredictable. And in that system, the most powerful thing you can do is not just speak louder, but speak smarter. Because people are not just looking for noise anymore. They're looking for clarity. They're looking for someone who can break things down, who can connect the dots, who can explain what's really going on beneath the surface. And that's exactly what you're doing right now. You're not just reacting, you're analyzing. You're helping your audience understand the bigger picture. So whether this situation leads to legal action or fades away like many online controversies, the real takeaway remains the same. The balance of power in media is shifting, and everyone can feel it. And when that shift happens, reactions become louder, conflicts become sharper, and moments like this become inevitable. So the question is not, who said what? The real question is, why did this get such a strong reaction? Because that's where the truth usually is. And as always, stay informed, stay critical, and don't just watch the headlines. Understand the story behind them.